Greetings, magical mavens. It's Afira here, the writing witch, and today I'm going to be sharing with you 5 fun and simple ideas to do on or around the spring equinox, all using eggs. Eggs are a universal symbol for fertility, rebirth, abundance, growth, and prosperity. And chances are you already have a carton of them in your fridge right now. So I invite you to grab some eggs and let's get crafting. Whether you're drawn to kitchen witchery, green witchcraft, or if you're an art witch or just enjoy getting crafty or building altars, or all of the above, there is something in this video for you. We'll be doing a playful spring equinox altar and then creating some objects for the altar using eggs, including eggshell candles 2 different ways, and a prosperity talisman inspired by Fabergé eggs. Then we'll do a simple edible prosperity spell and use the eggshells for some early gardening. If one of these ideas is calling to you right now, then I invite you to navigate there using the timestamps that are on the screen right now. If you're lucky, the end of March is bright, sunny, warm, and full of budding blossoms. But if you're like me, you might still be experiencing some winter weather. Where I live, you just never know whether it'll be blossoms or blizzards outside this time of year. Either way, I love to do some simple, fun, and enchanting little rituals to awaken the creative springtime energy within myself. Aside from basic spring cleaning, I also like to make sure I do something a little more on the magical side that my inner child will love. The inner child is one of the biggest themes that I tap into this time of year, and if you would like to know more about the importance of the inner child archetype and how you can evoke it this time of year to help you manifest your best life, then I invite you to watch the video linked right here. The first thing I like to do at the beginning of the month of March is to take down any remaining winter decor and set up my spring altar. This reminds me that Mother Earth is waking up, whether or not I'm able to see the signs of that in my outdoor environment yet. For the past few seasons, I've really been enjoying creating seasonal altars using predominantly objects I already own. There are always going to be more fun items you can purchase to help evoke the mood of the season, but as a real witch, it also makes sense for my altars to be made up of things that are genuinely part of my life, my home, and my practice. I start by looking around my home for things that fit into the overall scheme and theme of the season, in any way. One thing I have in wide varieties of themes and colors are books. So I've been having fun creating height on my altars using a bookish theme. Because the overall color scheme in the heart of my home is blue and gold, I've been experimenting with altar designs that incorporate shades of blue along with just 1 or 2 other colors that are directly representative of the season at hand. In this case, that means swapping out the dark night sky blues and icy silvers of winter for lighter daytime sky blues, grassy greens, and subtle hints of pastel flower colors for spring. I tend to enjoy symmetry on my altars, representing the divine masculine and the divine feminine, as well as the 5 elements. Especially for the spring equinox, which is very much about balance, I like to create an altar design that looks and feels balanced. Because I've been loving using this big sun effigy as a permanent representation of the masculine for my seasonal altars, I get to be creative with how to represent the feminine each season. For the spring equinox, I thought it would be nice to incorporate some dried flowers. As lovely as it would be for tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths to be all around me, in real life, it's a blizzard outside. So it feels authentic for me to use flowers with a light, airy scent that reminds me of the warmer seasons ahead, but in the form of dried bundles from last year's harvest. This creates a sort of full circle vibe, which I really enjoy. Because the spring equinox is often associated with goddess energy and creativity, I also decided to add a more obvious depiction of the divine feminine. Recently, I learned in my seasonal studies that the goddess Saraswati is celebrated in the springtime by the Hindu religion, which is really synchronistic because it just so happens that the only goddess statue I have is of Saraswati. She's the goddess of wisdom, speech, and art, which is perfect for my spring altar, as my fertility as a content creator is so linked to those themes. Unless you're brand new to my channel, you probably know that I'm an eclectic witch, and something I really feel called to emphasize is that as magical folk, we have the freedom to follow our own intuition and dance to the beat of our own drum. Rather than feeling obligated to go out and find effigies of the traditional Wiccan-style horned god or the goddess Ostara, I find it fun to mix and match symbols that are both immediately accessible to me and have personal significance in my practice. Wicca is just one of many spiritual paths that inspires me, and I also like to incorporate ideas from various different cultures that have influenced my personal path. Actually, one of the biggest cornerstones of my practice is the psychology and intentional evocation of inner archetypes. And one of my favorites is, of course, the inner child, which fits perfectly into the theme of the spring equinox season. So I figured I would feed two birds with one hand, so to say, and let my childhood toy stand in as both a representation of the inner child and the oh-so-iconic rabbit symbolism we expect to see this time of year. At that, the overall concept for the altar is done, and I then decided to gather some additional little bits and bobs that would further spruce up the space. For example, this vintage teacup my mom gave me. It celebrates both my inner child, who absolutely loved fancy tea parties, and the mother energy of the season, as it was a gift from my mother, who remembers having tea parties with me when I was young. I also included my Egyptian bast statue as a nod to Egyptian culture, which also has influenced a lot of our modern spring themes. And for me, cats are just as much a symbol of fertility at springtime as rabbits, only with more of a fierce protective energy, again creating that sense of balance. As we see on the tarot card, the Six of Cups, in order for that playful inner child, divine feminine energy to really flow, the masculine energy needs to be there to protect and create a safe space for that container. And the cat is definitely good at doing both. And of course, I had to include this little jeweled egg charm. This is a fun example of how the significance of objects and their symbolism can evolve over time along our paths. I had had this egg charm in my craft chest for years, not feeling any particular connection to it at all. I think someone had randomly given it to me at some point, but in 2020, when life guided me to dive deeper into my seasonal practices again, a symbol like this egg charm appeared to me in my inner child guided meditation. I then went looking for the egg charm in my collection and I couldn't seem to find it. I felt kind of sad, thinking just when I started feeling connected to it, I realized I must have finally lost it or given it away at some point. But then I ended up finding it again somewhere else later on, and I was so excited to see it. It's been an important symbol in my craft ever since, especially at springtime. To represent the elements that are such a huge part of my practice, I thought it would be fun to use these 4 handmade stone chalices that my partner made. Fun story, apparently he made these in his high school art class to serve as drinking goblets for playing Dungeons and Dragons. Apparently they were sitting in storage for a long time and he recently decided to give them to me, knowing that I would give them new life. And how fun is it that the inner child of my divine partner gets to make an appearance on my spring equinox altar too. creating this altar was when I realized I didn't really have a lot of other egg-themed items to further honor that theme of fertility this season. I couldn't even find the bag of old plastic eggs that I could have sworn was buried somewhere in my basement. So I decided to take this as a fun opportunity to get crafty. Around February's Eve, aka Imbolc, my partner gifted me with a big brick of wax, and I've been really enjoying making candles at home. So for the Spring Equinox, I thought it would be really fun to try making eggshell candles. I started by heating up some wax in a double boiler and then adding in the leftover wax from a red jar candle that I had burned around the winter solstice. Together, this made a lovely pastel pink wax for these playful egg-shaped candles. But of course, you could really use any color, especially if you plan on taking the safe route and using the eggshells as the jars for container-style candles. But since it's me, I decided to be extra and wanted to see what would happen if I used the eggshells as molds for open flame candles. And here's a bonus witchy tip for you. While you're stirring the wax on the double boiler, as well as when you're doing things like cracking the eggs and cleaning out the shells, these are all great times to focus your intention on what you're birthing into your life this spring. You can get really meditative and thoughtful about it, or you can just use my favorite hack. Repeat a mantra in your mind while doing these little tasks. It's simple and lighthearted, and the magic can work just as well. In either case, you need to fasten a small piece of wick to the floor of the eggshell. I thought I could easily get away with just using hot glue, but it would have been much easier to get it to stick once the hot wax went in if I would have used a proper wick tab. You can simply stash and save the old wick tabs from tea light candles, which I had been doing for years. But wouldn't you know it, I finally ended up throwing them out with last year's spring cleaning because I thought I just would never get around to using them. Go figure. I plan on hoarding leftover wax and tabs from old candles again now that I'm back in the swing of candle making. So here are some tips that I discovered during this fun little experiment. Firstly, the easiest and tidiest method is to just leave the wax inside the candles while you're burning them. Kind of like tea lights, but with eggshells in place of the metal tins. This way, all your wax can slowly burn down without melting all over the place or catching your other decorations on fire. If you choose this option from the get-go, I recommend creating slightly larger holes at the top of your eggshells just so that the mouth of the eggshell isn't too close to the flame. Secondly, if you do decide to fill your eggshell all the way up like I did, and you end up with these caverns in your candles as they cool, you can either carefully pour more from your wax pot to fill it in, or you can do it the easy way and drip another candle over it. And what we realized is that you could have done it this way from the very beginning. If you don't have a big brick of wax, or if you just don't feel like committing to the messy task of melting wax and trying to pour it carefully, which is a two-person job, you could just use storm candles or dinner candles or even tea light candles and just burn them over the shell until it's full. Since I only realized how much neater this method would be to burn after having already filled my eggshells all the way to the top, I will be peeling mine back gradually as my candle begins to burn down. And if you didn't get a ton of broken eggshells in it, I also recommend saving the insides of the eggs to cook with, because that same intention that you put into making the candles can also be taken into your body as well. And since this holiday is about Mother Earth, why not just be sustainable and use all of the parts of the materials that you're using? And while you're at it, you might also want to save your shells. Stick around to the end of the video to find out my witchy uses for eggshells. If you're doing these crafts all in one day on the spring equinox, at this point you're likely working up a bit of an appetite. Which, by the way, you certainly don't have to do everything on the spring equinox. I start gradually embracing the spring equinox themes as early as the 1st of March. That way I can enjoy the whole season without feeling rushed. And of course, for the actual day of Ostara, there are tons of really fun and fancy recipes you can find online. But for this video, I wanted to show you how simple a springtime kitchen witch spell can actually be. We're just going to be assembling an extremely basic boiled egg sandwich, but we're focusing on the symbolic meanings of every single ingredient we're using to cast some powerful magic. The spring equinox is a season of rebirth, growth, and the promise of potential prosperity, especially that of the physical realm. I like to incorporate eggs into my meals in the springtime so that even a simple weekday lunch can add to the energy of my overall prosperity workings for the season. As you may know, I'm in the process of manifesting a new home, and for a big manifestation like this one, I tend to do a big spell followed by lots of additional micro spells to add to the energy of the intention on a daily basis. This includes a morning devotional at my altar, but it can also include countless seemingly mundane rituals, simply practicing mindfulness in the home while repeating my mantras and incantations to myself as I go along. I have a specific sentence that's directly aligned with my overall home spell, but you can really use any words of power that call to you based on what you want to birth into your life right now. If you don't have a specific intention, you can always use something like my default incantation for domestic magic. Blessed be the garden, blessed be the home, blessed be our hearts and minds wherever we may roam. I like this incantation because it's easy to remember, and it can evoke blessings for myself, my loved ones, and can even be used to help channel positive energy to other parts of the world where people may be in need. Of course, this kind of mindfulness can be applied to any household task, but let's take a closer look at the magical properties of the ingredients of an egg sandwich. To me, bread represents abundance and stability. It's the hearty foundation of the sandwich, and it's the supports that hold everything together. In a way, you could even say it's the foundation and roof of the house. The egg generally represents the transition of a creation from intention into physical form, the birth of something new. Because eggs are delicate and hold the potential for new life, they also have a connotation of being precious. Eggs are sometimes even used in sympathetic magic to represent a person who's being healed. So I guess in this case you can even think of it as me and my cat curling up in the comfy bed created by the bread. Mayonnaise is composed of mostly more eggs, along with some oil, which brings up connotations of richness, luxury, and the anointment of something holy. For seasoning, I simply chose salt, pepper, and rosemary. Salt can represent cleansing and purification in spell work, as well as protection. And salt is also a crystal, meaning that it can amplify the energy of the spell overall. Pepper in my craft can encompass both another layer of protection and some oomph, so to say. It's that kick to get things in motion. And rosemary has lots of magical uses, but the simplest for me right now is the saying from Practical Magic: always grow rosemary by the front door. The Practical Magic house really inspires me, and growing rosemary at the front door is definitely something I intend to do at my new home that I'm manifesting. Onions have cleansing, purification, healing, and protective connotations for me. Raw onions in particular have detoxification effects when consumed, so this adds to the overall renewal/spring cleaning energy that creates space for new manifestations. I also threw on some peppers just for something fresh, green, and juicy. It represents the coming of new produce in the season ahead, as well as the successful harvest of my intentions. And of course, peppers are fun to grow in the garden. One of the biggest desires I have for my new home is ground level garden space. So to help call that into being, I've been trying to grow whatever I can on my apartment patio. So to add yet another layer to my overall spell, I decided to save the seeds from this pepper and, and plant some for the upcoming season. this one's an oldie but a goodie. Just your classic spring seed starting spell. Depending on where you live, the spring equinox may be a good time to start growing plants outdoors. But even if, like me, you live somewhere where even after Beltane on May 1st, there could still be some risk of frost, don't worry, I've got you covered. In my little bit of gardening experience, I found that most seeds don't need a lot of direct sunlight to start germinating. In fact, some even germinate in the dark. So depending on what you're growing, you can certainly make arrangements to start some seeds indoors at the end of March. You can start them on windowsills or even under a grow light if you need to. To turn your seed starting into a magical ritual, all you need to do is, you guessed it, add mindfulness. I've seen this done many ways, and I've done it multiple different ways myself over the years. You can write your wishes on the eggshells before adding the soil and seeds. You can slip little strips of parchment into the planters. You can even speak your wishes out loud over your seeds or breathe your intention into them. But this year, again, I'm keeping it consistent with my simple mantra repetition as I'm planting my seeds. Now, just a quick note here on seed starting spells. Some resources online will tell you that if your plants don't do well throughout the entire growing season, it means that your spells are backfiring or fizzling out. And for some witches, maybe that's true. But the thing about magic is that we see in it a reflection of our own beliefs and values. And it's my belief that even if something doesn't go perfectly on the first try, the energy has started you in motion toward the result that's truly best for you, whether it ends up looking the way you imagined or being on the timeline you expected. In some cases, the only reason a gardening project doesn't play out according to plan is simply that not everyone has a green thumb. Even those of us who have had successful gardening experiences in the past still lose some of our seeds in the gardening process every year. If you're in a different location than you're used to gardening in, that can be a factor as well. The point is, don't take it too hard if your seedlings don't all yield a big harvest. Planting the seeds and doing what you can to tend to them in whatever environment you're in is just a gesture to honor the abundant reality that we live in. Whether or not your gardening goes perfectly this year, just the time you spend connecting with nature is enough to bring your spell to fruition. So even if you have no gardening experience at all, I invite you to not be afraid to plant some seeds. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much for being here. Here's that bonus witchy tip that I had promised earlier about the leftover eggshells from some of the other projects. Save your eggshells this season and use them either in your witchcraft or in your garden, or both. Many folk gardeners believe that finely crushed eggshells, along with some other kitchen scraps, can make a good soil fertilizer for your plants. So if you do a lot of gardening, I actually recommend keeping a stash of eggshells around so you always have some on hand. And eggshell powder has significance in folk magic as well. Along with the other egg correspondences we talked about throughout this video, eggshell powder is also often used in spells for protection, as a shell is kind of a protective fortification. If you want to keep powdered eggshells in a witchy jar, just be sure they're totally dried out first. I like to keep a teacup on top of my toaster oven where I throw eggshells as I'm cooking throughout the week. The heat from the toaster dries and cures the eggshells and any leftover egg that may have been on them, and when the cup is full, I grind it with a mortar and pestle, and I either use it right away or transfer it to a storage jar for later use. And of course, I recommend bringing that mindfulness to the cooking, the grinding, and whatever project you end up using the powder for. If your intention is to use the powder primarily for protection, I recommend grinding counterclockwise. If you're focused on the fertility aspect, clockwise corresponds with that. And if you're not sure which you will likely use it for yet, I find that clockwise is always good because it'll help you move your intentions forward in any case. Time to make beautiful jeweled eggshell ornaments for your Spring Equinox altar. Actually, I chose to make mine in the same colors as my home decor, so I can keep it up all year long. The first step is to blow out the egg. I know, but I promise it'll be totally worth it when you see how beautiful this ornament turns out. Tutorials I saw on YouTube made blowing out an egg look really easy, but honestly, it was quite a challenge for me. Rather than poking holes with a needle, I found that the only way to get a large enough hole without also smashing the egg was to rotate the tip of a box cutter gently over and over again until a hole was carved out. And even then, the egg cracked a little bit, so I had to be really careful with it. I also ran the egg under a stream of water to clean it out, and I also learned to be careful while shaking the water back out, as the pressure of your hand can crack it as well. Wrapping a paper towel around the eggshell would have helped it dry faster by drawing the water out of the holes, but what I did was just set it upright and let it drain for at least an hour. Once dry, it's time to start decorating the egg. This is the fun part. And this is not just your basic witch egg dyeing here. The goal of this art witch ritual is to make the egg as royal and ornate as possible. You can even think of it as a self-love ritual, where you almost think of the eggshell as a representation of you, and the spell is to dress you up like the queen or king that you are. Feel free to bust out your craft box or use old costume jewelry. Let your inner child lead the way here and have fun. Because it's me, I decided to look up pictures of vintage egg trinkets and try to replicate their classical symmetrical design. But you could go totally rogue here and make yours abstract if you want. I was honestly debating whether to make a bunch of these and put them on my artificial pine tree to sort of transition it from winter to spring themed. But after realizing how exhausting the egg blowing was for me, I decided to be precious about this one eggshell and turn it into a one-of-a-kind altar effigy. To create a base for my tiny monument, I painted a curvy wine cork bronze. I could have used it just like that, but I remembered that I have this awesome antique brass claw foot that's been sitting around for years, and this could be the perfect use for it. I cut the cork to the same height as the claw foot, and together they created a throne on which my egg would sit. The final step ended up being two final steps. I finished everything off with a gilded design with gold puff paint, and once it was dry, I realized the egg could also benefit from some pearl white spots as well. So mine took a few hours to complete, but it was totally worth the effort to do this meditative art project. The energy I put into it will serve to hold space for prosperity on my altar, hopefully for years to come. I'll have to be very careful with it and keep it safe as a self-love talisman. So are you planning on trying any of these ideas for your Spring Equinox celebration? Or do you have other ideas that you're excited to try? I would love to hear from you in the comments. It's been so nice to see how many people are exploring and sharing about their seasonal celebrations this year. With all that's been going on in the world the past few years, it seems like we're all feeling called to lean into the simple joys of things like the changing of the seasons. Are you ready for a refresh, a rebirth, or a renewal for this coming spring season? If so, I would love to invite you to join me for a fun, lighthearted guided journaling adventure with me. I'm excited to announce that the Spring Equinox section of my Year in a Day program is now available on its own for those who just want to go season by season. You get instant lifetime access to my beautiful printed grimoire pages, which include information and journaling prompts to help you claim your power to reinvent yourself this season. You get to choose whether you want to print in black and white or in color, and you can make a small folded book template, or you can use basic 8.5 by 11 binder style sheets. Additionally, you'll also get access to my mini course on how to harness the forward-moving energy of the spring season to help you manifest your goals this year. I invite you to join or learn more at the link below. Are you new to the Wheel of the Year and just interested in a full rundown of how to work with the energy of the spring equinox to better your life? If so, I invite you to watch this lovely little video that I made for you right here.